Hi and welcome to another tutorial from Hans. Today we're looking at the Stomp text intro tutorial. So I got my camera in front of me here. I've set the view from on the numpad to 7, so 7 goes to the top view. Then I've hit Control Alt and 0 to set the camera to that view, and we've deleted all assets in the scene outside of the camera. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift and A on my keyboard and create a plane. Use S and scale the plane up. Good. Use G to maneuver it. Use S and X, and that's S, that's X to scale it on the x-axis, and we want to cover the radius of the camera. Next we're going to go ahead and give it a color. I'm going to go to the materials on the right hand panel. We're going to change this from principal BSDF to emission, and we're going to make it a black. So just hit the color and let's bring this value down to turn it black. Cool. Let's go ahead and change the view to viewport shading so we can see the color. Next we're going to go ahead and add our text. So we're just going to go ahead and hit Shift A again. That's to add an object or element, and we're going to add our text. It's behind the black, so we're just going to use G and Z to bring it to the front. Use G and Y and G and X to maneuver, and we're going to go ahead and type what we want the text to show. So in all caps, I'm going to want it to show Stomp. Cool. Next we're going to change the font of this, right? From the default Blender font, I'm going to change it to Rubik Bold. That's my preferred font. It is a free font to download, and so it's accessible if you want it. That's Rubik Bold. You can see it here at the bottom left. Cool. So next we're going to give this text a material. Let's go ahead and click the material tab, select emission, and I'm going to pick a white. So it should be just white by default, right? Yeah. And we have our color here. So what we want for this Stomp here right now is that we have two animations in one. We have a slight shift to the left, and we have a lift on the Y. So we're going to have our X and Y movement here. So first up, hit G and Y. Cool. And we're going to hit, we're going to put G and Y. Let's put the text in the right place. Hit G and X just to slightly move it to the side so that it's slightly off kilter. Cool. And if we want there, we can just hide the background and we can see it's just slightly off kilter. We want it coming down a bit more onto the X. Then I'm just going to go ahead and press F3 on my keyboard. Then we're going to convert this text to a mesh. So I'm going to type in convert to mesh. I have mine there already because I use it quite often. Then I'm going to press tab. I'm going to change use limited dissolve. It's not necessary here, but I prefer to use limited dissolve because it just makes the topology easier to see. Cool. Then we're going to go ahead to tab, press P on our keyboard. I'm going to go to loose parts, and that separates the text elements there one by one into their separate letters. Cool. Once we've done that, now we're just going to go ahead and move into the animation. So we're just going to animate one, and then we're going to copy the animation to the other letters, then we just unlink them so that we can add a stagger. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go to the Y transformation in the object panel here. I'm going to hit a keyframe. Let's go to like excuse me, frame 15. Let's go ahead and change the frames per second also. Actually change this in the render panel view. I'm going to change this to frame rate to 30 frames per second. Stomp looks great in high frames per second, so you can even go 60 if you feel that way, but there's plenty of Stomp examples with that. I'm just going to go ahead and hit G and Y, bring up to the X line here, and we're going to go ahead and go to the keyframes and insert single keyframe. So this moves up. How does that look? That looks pretty good. Good pace too. So for the next step now, we're just going to go ahead and add the X. So about 10 frames in, we want to add an X keyframe here. Cool. And then we're going to have the S move a little bit on the X. So have it move across about here, I think. Yeah, something to this effect. Good. And then we're going to apply this animation to all of the letters here. So select all of the letters here and then select S last. I'm going to hit Control and L, and you're going to link the animation data. Cool, so everything's going to be animated at the same time. Next, we're just going to go ahead and hit Control and U. Is it Shift and U I use? Right, oh, that's my shortcut. To access it for yourself, you have to go to Relations, make single user, and go to Animation, right? But I've already set a shortcut key for materials, so mine is Shift U. I advise you do the same, because I use this function all the time. Go to Object Animation, and that will separate the animation for each one, such that when we move the keyframes for one letter, it doesn't affect the keyframes of the other letters. Cool, so now we can go ahead and just add a bit of stagger. So the S is already at keyframe 1 at the timeline for 1, so we're just going to move the others in accordance. Alright, this is a bit too much. Right, we want the delay, it to have a delay, but not by too much, so we're going to use 2 frames here, or 1 frame, sorry, to separate all of them. So this to frame 3, this to frame 4, and this to frame 5. Cool. Yeah, so this looks good. I think it's about in the center as well, and that makes for the start. If you want to see the animation properties that you have, I'll have a graph open so that you can actually see. So we can bring back our background now, which is the black. Good. Now if you do this and you don't get it essentially in the middle the way you want to, but you don't want to mess about with the animation of the original assets, you can go ahead and just create an empty, which is a sphere, and just parent all of these to the empty. Good. Parent it with Control and B and keep transformation, and then you just move the parent in accordance to where you want the center to be. Right. Sometimes it can be a little bit hard to judge when doing this type of animation when you want it to go into the center, so this will do it for you. Cool. Next, we're going to add the text that we have at the back. We're going to create the text again. I should really have duplicated and kept a copy, but it's not too difficult to recreate. So for the interest of time, I would suggest that you duplicate the stomp that you did previously, so that you have it to edit now. But we're just going to go ahead and do this quickly. And let's go ahead and add the rubric bold. Let's put it behind this. Let's take a look at how things look. We're going to Alt and H to see where the text is. I think we could stand to lift this up on the Z a bit. And I'm going to lift this on the Z here so that it's above the background. Good. We're going to give this a material. And that material is going to be the emission. And we're going to make it gray. Awesome. Yeah. In fact, we can even make it a darker gray. Let's make it slightly darker. Good. And now we can go ahead and add some of the. You can look at the background text animation. This is popular effect in Stomp, where we just have the character or the kerning expand and contract in accordance to the different scene. So nothing different here, but it's easy to do in Blender. First, we just have to set the alignment to center. It's going to move the text. We just have to move it back, and then with G and X, sorry, we move it back, and then we're going to go to character spacing. And we can see here that the character spacing causes our text to expand out and in, right? And that's what we want. For the first scene, I think it expands out. I don't think it expands in. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and add a keyframe here. Let's go ahead and insert a keyframe at frame 1. Cool. And at frame 20, we want it to expand out a bit to about here. So keyframe, GX, and yeah. Cool, this looks about right. The stomp's a bit slow. Yeah, this looks good. And if you need to make this a bit faster, you can go ahead and just scale this. You can go ahead and just go to your timeline here, dope sheet, see this button here. Just uncheck it, and this will show you the keyframes for all elements in the scene. Good. And then we can go ahead and just select all keyframes here with A and just scale in a bit. Alright, and that will increase the speed. So just use S and scale in. Cool. Okay, so we're moving on to the camera marker part of this tutorial. And the camera marker is perhaps the main component of this tutorial. And this is how we navigate from one scene to another in Blender. And we're not talking about scenes in the sense of scenes that we create up here. We're talking about scenes in the sense of the separation of different key elements in an animation or in a video. Good. Now there are several ways to do this in Blender. Right, markers is one of them, and I would argue perhaps the most important one. And that's what we're going to be using to switch from one camera to the next, and each camera will show its different scene. So we have one camera here right now, which is our main camera. If I press F2, you can see I've named it the first camera. Well, not main camera, in main camera in the sense of the scene, but it's the first camera that we have here. So when we press 0 on our numpad here, we navigate and see the scene through this main camera here. But we can have more than one camera in a scene. So what we're going to do here, we're just going to go out by holding our middle mouse button on the viewport and just moving the mouse up and down as we do that to pan the view. And we're going to select this camera here. Make sure it's selected, highlighted in orange. We're going to hit Shift and D to duplicate this. We're going to hit G and X to move it to the side. So we want it moved out of the way so the camera does not pick up anything from this scene right here that we've created. Right, so we want the camera to be further away, far away from the main scene, so it doesn't capture any of the information here in this scene. Now, to make sure it doesn't capture anything in this viewport, we're going to go over to the Scene tab here. I'm going to go to a camera. This is what the Blender assigns as the first camera to be the main camera that we're viewing into. So when we press 0 on our keypad, it's going to press 0 based on, it's going to go to this camera and center our view based on this camera. So we're going to change it to this second camera here. So I'm going to press F2 to name this second camera. I'm just going to call it second camera. I'm going to change the camera to the second one. Let's type in second camera. Good. So when you press 0 on our numpad, we can see that now the main camera is this camera. And looking at the parser palette value, right, we can see that this dark area around the camera is represented by what the camera cannot see in this viewpoint. And we can see that these elements in the scene are not visible by this camera. If we press F12, we can see we're not seeing anything in this camera. So we know that we put the camera farther enough so it doesn't interact with the first scene. Cool. So with that, let's go ahead and change this back to the first camera now. Yeah. Next, we're going to go ahead and create the markers. So we can now we have two cameras. We can make markers, right? Let's go ahead and add a marker. Make sure in Dope Sheet, make sure your mouse is hovering the Dope Sheet timeline. Press M on our keyboard, and we see that we've created a marker. And if you take a look at this marker, we see the dotted line represents the frame that the marker is on, and this this set of characters here, F-01, is just the temporary name that is assigned to the marker. So what we're doing here now, we can rename this marker like we rename an object. If we press F2, we can change the name, but in this instance we don't have to, because when we bind the camera to this marker, the marker will take on the camera name. So let's go ahead to the channel marker, sorry. Let's go ahead to bind camera to markers. Now you have to make sure that the camera that you want to bind is selected. In our case it is, and we can also do this with Control and B. Right, so we can see that the camera is bounded to this first marker. Now this is not going to change anything now. It's only when we add the second marker that we'll see the change. Right, but this is essentially saying that from this frame on, the camera that will be shown is the first camera. So when we want the camera to change now at about frame 18, good, we're going to add a second marker. Just press M, and we're going to go ahead and go to our viewport and select the second camera, and we're going to bind this camera to this marker. So we can use Control and B. Good. And we see that we're on the second camera. So if you notice now, the viewport is no longer on the first camera. If we press 0 and press 0 again, the main camera has been switched. If we check here to the scene, we can see that the main camera has also been switched. Good. So the marker changes the main camera, and this is what allows us to animate different scenes. Right. So the only part now to focus on the second scene now, such that it looks appealing, is that we're going to add a bit of anticipation or a bit of animation start and stop. So make it look like the cameras are animating in unison with each other in the same interpolation pipeline. So what do I mean by this? Right, in the preview, if we look at the preview here, we can see that the camera has a little zoom in and then it zooms out. Good. Zoom in and zooms out, and this tells the user that there's going to be a motion, that there's a motion start and there's a motion end. So this is a bit of anticipation, and then the second camera finishes it in one pipeline. So we're going to add some keyframes to achieve this effect. Let's go over to the tutorial. Let's go ahead and add this. So we want it to start moving from about frame 10. So let's go ahead to our transformation tab here. We're going to add a keyframe on the Z. Good. And we're going to have it end at about 18 here. At 17 first. Good. I'm going to have the camera moved in. Make sure that the camera is selected. Sorry, I thought mine was. It wasn't. Let's just try this again. Go to keyframe 17 and zoom it in. Cool. So just play it. We see that we got a bit of a zoom in, right? But we see that it's a Bezier zoom in. It has a start in and start out, right? And it slows to start and it slows to end. But to make the animation feel fluid, it can't slow to end, right? Because this indicates that the animation is coming to a halt, but it's not. We want the animation halt to be indicated with the end of the animation of the second camera. Alright, so we're going to have to remove this slowdown. And we can do that by going to the graph editor. So if we go to the graph editor here, good, we can see here the Bezier slows in and slows out. Alright, so instead of that, what we want to do is to make this section here, we can go ahead and just use a, let's use a cubic here. Let's use cubic here as well. Good. And we're going to use an ease in. So as we see here, when it zooms out, there's the animation doesn't slow down when coming to the end of the interpolation between the two frame points, or two keyframes. Yeah, it keeps its speed, and this is important because we're going to carry on the speed to the next camera. So if we look at the second camera now, we're going to go ahead and go to the Z keyframe, add an insert a Z location. We're going to go to about frame 24, and we're going to have it zoom in also. Good, about here is good. Add a keyframe, and this also adds the default Bezier, but we don't want a slow in, we want it to start fast and slow out. So we're going to go ahead and add cubic again, but instead of having it go to ease in, sorry, we're going to have it go to ease out. Good, so this should make the animation look like one fluid animation, and it does, right? Because there's no slowdown in between. And if what we can do to see how this looks, let's go ahead and select that camera, make sure the two are selected, and let's go ahead and hit make sure that we select both of them here as well, the Z location, by holding Z and press A. We can just press period on our numpad or delete key, and we can see that the animation here comes down fast and starts fast. So essentially, if we just move this down, just to show you what I mean, we'll move it back in a bit. We've made essentially a curved Bezier like this for the two cameras. So they look like they're part of the same they operate like they're part of the same animation interpolation. Cool. And that looks very smooth, and that's what we want. Good, so the text that goes into it is pretty much standard. It's the same as this text here. So I'm just going to pause it, right, and do that white text, and then show you. It's not much different. It just does the opposite of this. So it's a pretty easy animation. Okay, so we've added the intro part. We see the intro zoom out with it. It's a bit slow. Let's go ahead and just speed it up a bit. Yeah, and that's how we get our stomp effect here. And it's basically just the opposite of the stomp here, where we have it scroll in. We're going to have it zoom out here. We're going to have it stretch out. Cool. So this stretches in, this stretches out. Same animation essentially. No need to really go over it. We've gone over that already. And the only thing is that the colors are a bit desaturated because we haven't changed it from Filmic to standard. So let's go to the render options here up top, and we're going to go to color management. We're going to change this from Filmic to standard, and that will give us the colors true to what they're supposed to be. Cool. And in the first step, I had it go in. It should be the stomp. Stomp should be expanding in. It shouldn't be expanding out, sorry, it should be contracting in, and that's what we have here. So for the next part, we're going to add a third marker for the third scene. So this first marker is for the first scene, this second marker is for the second scene, and this third marker is for the third scene. Now what will happen is that the elements from the first scene, right, are going to show in the third scene because we're toggling between the two cameras. So this is the first camera, the second camera, and we're toggling back to the first. Now because we don't want this stomp to show up in the third scene, we have to remove it somehow. Alright, for me, I did a transformation scale to all of the elements here so they disappear. So first up, we can see that we have this empty here that we added from the first part of this tutorial. I parented this stomp background to that same empty, and then when we reach the second scene, I had the empty scale to 0. That way all elements parented to that empty will also scale to 0, and we won't see anything when we toggle back to this first camera for the third scene. Cool. For the next step, we're going to create the outline of the text. So you're going to hit Shift and A, you're going to select text, we're going to type in text, TXT. We can't, we want to make sure that caps lock is on and type in TXT because we want in capitals. Alright, we can't see the text material because it shows up as black and we have a black background. So what we're going to do first is we're going to change the font, and then we're going to just change the material. Right? And we're going to give the material an emission, and the default emission color is white, and that's the color we want. So if we scale it up, we want it to cover the entire width of the camera. Good, so we can see it here. Let me just go ahead and turn off screen lights. I think that will make things easier to see. Good, so we have the text here. We're going to create an outline from this text. So first up, we have to press F3 and we have to convert it to a mesh. Then we're going to press A to select all of the vertices in edit mode. Then we're going to press X and we're going to go to limited dissolve. Once we go to limited dissolve, we're going to go ahead and press I for insert. Good, with all the vertices selected, press I, and we're going to move our mouse button. We're going to move our mouse up, sorry, and that's going to create an inset into the text itself. So we have an inset here. I think this is about right, and this will make up our outline. So what we're going to do now is that we have to remove the intersecting vertices because we can see that the face is intersecting here, and that's going to cause problems. But before we do that, let's go ahead and assign this inserted or this inset, these new created inset vertices to a vertex group. So we're going to go to data, I'm going to add a vertex group, and I'm going to assign the new vertices to this vertex group. Let's go ahead and deselect and select to make sure it's assigned, and let's go ahead and name this to internal, or we can just say inset. That's also good. So with inset now, all we have to do is just deselect this now, and we're going to go to each one of these corners here, and we're going to see that we're seeing some interweaving here with the vertices, which is causing the face calculation to go wrong. Let's go ahead and press B on the keyboard, do a box select to select the vertices, press delete on your numpad or period, right, and that will zoom into the vertices, and we can see what's actually happening here. You can see where the interaction is going, where the interweaving is going, and if we separate it and then zoom out, we can see we don't have the face error here. But it's showing us that we have to do a bit more of this, so we're going to do this for all of the areas where the vertices are intertwining where they shouldn't be, and then we're going to come back. Okay then, so we've removed all the face interactive calculation errors. And I'm just going to go ahead and press G and Z to bring this up so it separates from the background, because it's kind of close to the background here. And now we can move on to our array. So let's go ahead and press tab to go into, let's go ahead and press tab to go into edit mode. Let's go ahead and select the inset here. And we're just going to assign this a new material. So we're going to add a new material by pressing the plus button. Then we're going to go ahead and press new, and we're going to add emission shader, and we're going to make the emission shader black. And then we're going to press assign, and that will assign all of the vectors that are selected to this new color. We see that the T needs to be edited a bit, so just going to go ahead and edit that quickly by lifting these up. And with that, we have our outline. Cool. Once we have our outline and we have the text, we can go ahead and add the array modifier. Let's go to modifiers and add the array modifier. Good. And by default, the array modifier is set to relative offset, and the offset that they set by default is on the X. We're not going to want the X-axis to be the relative default, and we're not going to use relative for the offset either. We're going to use constant. And the reason we're going to be using constant and not relative is that because our text is flat, right, the relative data can't calculate the Z-axis because we don't have any Z depth to our original object. As such, it's going to give us an error where we won't be able to transform the Z. But if you have a constant offset that uses a set definition of measurement, we're not going to have that problem. So let's go ahead and just move the Z down. We can see that it moves down here, not an issue. Let's show you in relative, and try to move the Z down just for reference. Right, so we can try to move the Z down. We notice that there's no Z movement, and that's because this text doesn't have any Z depth. It's perfectly flat in the eyes of Blender, and so a relative offset is not going to work. Let's go ahead and select the constant again, and we're going to have it to be positive, and we want the Z to be positive as well. 0.01. Good. And with the positive offset here, we're just going to increase this to 9. Yeah. About 9. Let's press 0 on our keypad here. Let's reduce the Y offset a bit, and let's go ahead and add some keyframes for the camera. So it's G and Y, bring it to the bottom. Good, and this we're going to go ahead and add some keyframes here. So let's go ahead and just increase the offset so that it goes beyond past screen, and add some keyframes, and that should be it. So count at 30, at 40 we want it 9, and at 30 we want it to be 0. Alright, we're going to give it more time, like to 50, and that should be it. Okay, we're moving on to the final part of this tutorial, which is the fourth scene and the tutorial text. So I've changed a couple of things, right, in preparation for this. We've added a Z animation here to the camera from the text. So let's go ahead and see it. We just have the camera move up and then come down, and then second camera is on the same interpolation pipeline, and so it finishes the animation. Let's take a look at that, how that looks. Cool. We put it on frame 60 here, and we have the camera finish it. We also have the tutorial text here, which is contracting from a character spacing expand as an animation. We've done that in the prior steps, and I've also added a Z animation as well, so it's moving down along with the camera. Cool. Let's take a look at it. Right. Now the original camera that was, or the second scene that we're using, which uses the second camera, had the background originally as white, so we had to change that background from white to black. So we can just zoom out, we can see it change to black here for a quick animation. Cool. And those are the changes. So we can move on to the God rays and the God rays, the light rays, or the volumetric lights, you know, however you want to call it. So to do that, we're going to need a cube. So we're going to go ahead and hit Shift and A. I'm going to create a cube, and this cube is going to contain the light of the volumetric rays. So we're going to use G and Y, just G and X, sorry, just move it across, and let's come out of camera view and see what we've got here. And we want this cube to cover the camera as well as the scene that the camera is looking at. So let's go ahead and scale it on the Z and use G and Z to move it up. Let's press 0 to go back to the camera view to see what we're looking at, and I think this looks just about right. Good. So what we have to do next is that it's going to become difficult to see what's happening in the scene with this solid box. So what we're going to do is that we're going to change the box from solid texture to wireframe in the viewport. So if we go over to the object here and panel and go to viewport display and then go to display as, it has textured as the default. We're going to change that to wire. Cool. Let's go ahead and give this cube a name now. We're going to call it light container. Cool. I spell container, so I put container. Alright, so that we know what this is called. Next, let's go ahead and add our light. So we have a light here actually. I'm going to delete it and just add one. Let's just put the cursor there and add Shift and A, and we're going to add a light. I'm going to make the light a point light. Cool. We're going to increase the power of this light from 10 watts to 1000 watts. Cool. I'm going to add a material now to this volumetric box to make it able to contain the light that we see here. So let's go ahead and go to the materials. Let's go to new, and it's going to give it by default principal BSDF. Let's go ahead and remove this because we need a volume material, not a surface material. I'm going to use volume scatter, and by default, because of the density of volume scatter, we're going to see everything turn gray. That's okay, that's nothing wrong. We just have to reduce the density. Let's go to the volume scatter options where we have color and then we have density. We're going to change this from 1 to 0.01. Cool. With that, we can see our tutorial text about the right color. And we're not seeing anything happen with the light here, and that's because we need to press F12 to see the results. Press F12, we can see we have the light and we also have some God rays, but the God rays, though visible, are kind of diffused. We want it to look more like when it's shining through trees, and for that we're going to need to add a filter on top. So let's go ahead and add a plane. I'm going to duplicate this. Well, yeah, should we duplicate it? No, let's create a new plane actually. So Shift and A and create a new plane. And let's go ahead and just scale that plane so it covers the entirety of the camera view here. I'm going to give this plane a emission that is black. Let's give it a emission that's black. And we're going to go and put some holes in this plane such that it becomes the filter light trees. So we're going to go and create some holes for it. Let's create a cube. Let's scale the cube in on the X and scale it on the Y. Cool. Have it about here. Alright, I think this is about right. Yeah. Next, we're going to go ahead and go to the array modifier. Let's duplicate these boxes here. I'm going to make it 3 by 3. So let's go to the array modifier and let's give it 3. Let's give it an increase factor here. I think this is about okay. Cool. We can use the scale on the X a bit. Let's stretch it out a bit. Then we're going to apply the array modifier. We're going to duplicate it twice and move it along the Y. Duplicate it again and move it along the Y. And let's press 0 to see how it looks from top down. I think this looks okay. Let's go ahead and select all of them and hit Ctrl and J, and that's going to put all of them in the same vertex object. So with the vertex object here as one set with 9 cubes in it, let's go ahead and just select the plane that we created. Let's add a Boolean modifier. Let's select the cubes. By default is on difference, and that's the one we want to use. And then we're going to click apply. We no longer need our cubes now. We can delete them, and we have holes here for the light to shine through. Let's go ahead and just scale them in a bit. use box select with B to scale them in a bit, and then what we want to do is navigate our light over to this. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit Shift and S. I'm going to say active. I think it's 3D cursor to active. Let's see. Or to selected, cursor to selected, and that's going to put the cursor to the center. Then we're going to get our light here that we've added, and we're just going to snap this to the cursor, selection to cursor, and that will make sure that it's in the center where we want it. We're going to move it down below the plane, and we're going to parent the plane to the light. So we're going to animate the light. So set the plane and then select the light, and then we're going to parent it with Control and P, keep the object transformation, and with that now we have the light shining through these holes. Now we can press F12 to see what that looks like. Yeah, and we can see that we have a very visible God rays here. Alright, so these God rays look really good, but the boxes are showing, so I'm going to scale the boxes in a little bit more so that the light of the flare hides the boxes themselves. Alright, so that way we don't have to worry about this showing in the viewpoint here. Let's see what we got. F12. Right, we can see now the box is no longer visible, and we got this excellent well-defined God rays here. So the next part really is just to animate the light itself. So we're going to go ahead and just animate it here. So as the text comes in about here, I'm going to have the animation animate. We want it to be around the T, or the top of the L rather. So I'm only doing it by eye now, but that should be okay. Let's go ahead and add a keyframe along the X and have it scale to go across the entirety of the text to land here. Alright, so it comes about here and goes across. Cool, and we want the light intensity to start around here. So we're going to go over to the light itself, add a keyframe and add another keyframe here. I'm going to make the intensity, in fact let's add a keyframe about 64. We're going to make the intensity increase from 0 to 1000, and then we're going to have it decrease as it reaches the end from 1000 to 0 here. Cool. Alright, it's a bit fast. Let's go ahead and just zoom this out a bit. Yeah, I think this looks really good. See how this looks at the end. Okay, this is a bottom. Okay, and this should be the material's end. Now you're not going to be able to see it real time. I'm going to show you real time briefly. Let's go and just head over to scene lights so we can see it, and let's see how it renders here. Cool, and it shows kind of boxy like, but if we stop and start it, we can see the rays are indeed operating as they should, and they dissipate. Right, let's go ahead and just bring this in a bit. The disappearance of the rays can come in a little bit quicker. Yeah. And this looks really nice. So if the next step now naturally would be to add some, what we need to do, sorry, is that here we just need to have this disappear. So I think we can scale it. I don't know, I've never scaled the lights before. Let's see. Let's come here. I'm gonna come here and just scale it so that it disappears. Yeah, it works. Good, and let's have it show up when we want it, so it doesn't interfere with the second scene. And this concludes the Stomp intro text tutorial. If you enjoyed this tutorial, give it a thumbs up. We did cover quite a bit in this tutorial. This is less of a singular project and more like an entire motion project, so it's a bit longer, but it covers some really nice effects, and a very important effect of markers. It's essential if you're going to want to do proper full animation and motion graphics in Blender. You're going to need to use markers, and we'll have a dedicated tutorial talking about the different ways that you can draw in scenes in Blender, and markers is one of them. Cool. You have anything that you think you could have done better? Leave it in the comments. You have accommodations that you want to leave, you can leave it in the comments. You have something that you're not happy about, you can leave that in the comments. Your contribution is very valuable. Also, for the gentleman that asked me to add the screencast in the tutorial, I did try, but the add-on doesn't seem to work with this version of Blender. So unless they update it or they have a different one that I can use, I haven't got it to work, so I can't show you the screen keys as readily. I'll try to think of another way to add them. I think that's useful, right? But I haven't gotten to that just yet. So until I see you again with another tutorial, get up and design a new dawn. Later.